Can I get you guys to come up, please?
The ritual handshake.
Thanks to both Stephen Pierson and Councilmember Levin for joining us tonight. I'm just going to do a little quick run of show before we get started. We'll give them about a minute each to introduce themselves, and then we have about 45 minutes of questions that we'll ask. And we have time first sitting right here, so pay attention to them. After we ask our questions, we'll have a few minutes for the candidates to ask one question each to each other. And then we're going to take questions from the audience. We're going to hand out some index cards. Alex and Lincoln are going to be handing those out and picking them up from you. So if you have a question, make sure to get an index card from them, write it down, hand it back to them, they'll pass it up to us. I want to make one disclaimer about that, which is that both of our organizations are very focused on North Brooklyn issues, and so that's what a lot of our questions are going to be about. So if you're here from another part of the district, I highly encourage you to write down a question that is relevant for your part of the district. And with that, I want to turn it over for the introductions, starting with Mr. Pierson.
I get my dessert privileges revoked for using prepositions at the end of my sentences. But I do feel blessed now. The value that my family placed on education above all else, it's absolutely guided my life. It's the reason why 8 years ago I founded a nonprofit that runs after-school tutoring programs for at-risk youth. Seeing the life-changing effects that these classes, these programs have had on our students, I can't overstate how meaningful it's been to me. The only thing that surpassed that in my life has been the fulfillment of raising my incredibly precocious 2-year-old daughter with my wife, my equally incredible wife, Mino. And we have our second daughter on the way in just over 2 months. These are the reasons why I feel so committed to this community. These are the reasons why I joined my community board. These are the reasons why I'm a member of the Democratic County Committee. And these are the reasons why I'm here tonight running for City Council. Thank you so much for coming and for listening to both of us.
Thank you very much to New Kings Democrat and to the Greenpoint Gazette and to all of you for being here tonight. This is a great turnout. I'm Steve Levin. I'm council member in the 33rd District, and it has been the greatest privilege of my life to have had the opportunity to represent this amazing district for the last 3.5 years in the New York City Council. I live here in Greenpoint. I live on Morgan Avenue. And so the issues that matter to this community are the issues that matter to me. Whether that's fighting for better schools, increased after-school programs, increased early childhood education programs, livable streets, and more transportation options for our families, or increased open space and parks. Those are the issues that keep me going every day and that I go to City Hall advocating for every single day. Now, you're going to hear a lot tonight from my opponent about Vito Lopez, a man who I believe has no place in public life. That is the campaign that he has been running thus far. And you're going to hear more of that tonight. It's going to be, as it has been now, for Vito Lopez. But the fact of the matter is that I have been here with this community. This community knows me. This community has worked with me. Whether it has been coming together to stand up for families, to organize for families after Hurricane Sandy and getting vital resources out to the areas that needed it, or introducing participatory budgeting to this district, we have worked together and we have done great things. And so I'm looking forward to talking with everybody here, not only tonight, but throughout the rest of the campaign on the issues that matter to you most, so that we can continue forward and make the city and this district an even better place to live. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We're going to jump right in with the first question. So Greenpoint and Williamsburg take on nearly 40% of New York City's trash. The City Council and the Mayor did approve an equitable solid waste management plan years ago, but it has faced significant opposition from NIMBY communities. As our councilman, how will you ensure that the implementation of how will you ensure the implementation of the swamp? And what will you do to reduce trash handled in our community and the extraordinary truck traffic that it generates?
That's a great question, Lacey. And Lacey's exactly right. Greenpoint handles 38% of our city's trash. It's a gross violation of our city's fair share laws. There is a plan underway to open a waste management station on the Upper East Side, East 91st Street. Not surprisingly, the Upper East Siders are rebelling against this. I will do everything possible to make sure that this station opens and takes some of the burden away from us at long last. And if this doesn't happen, then I will sue the city. I will build a coalition of leaders to sue the city on behalf of the fair share laws.
Well, thank you, Lacey. This is an issue that is near and dear to my heart. As I said, I live on Morgan Avenue. I know the truck traffic that comes through this neighborhood and that affects the quality of life so deeply here for so long. And it has been absolutely unfair for generations for this community to have dealt with, as Mr. Pierson noted, 38% of the city's solid waste. I'm actually very glad that there are some mayoral candidates who have been able to stand up for opening up the waste transfer station on East 91st Street, but we need to continue to fight to get the full implementation of the swamp program. I've been happy to work with my colleague, Councilmember Diana Reynoso, who represents the 34th District, on fully implementing the swamp program. We've been in talks just in recent weeks about coming up with the equitable, the fair number, so that we can get capacity down. But the key is in this is making sure that the maximum capacity of waste, of solid waste, is decreased as per the swamp program, and that's fully implemented. And so if we're not able to get it done in the next couple of months, I guarantee you that I will be first in line on January 1st to reintroduce the legislation to get that capacity down so that we do not have the number of trucks coming through our neighborhood polluting our streets. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This next one it's a big question, so you get 2 minutes. Many of the promises made to the community for parks and open space and affordable housing during the 2005 rezoning have yet to be realized. And yet, development spurred by the rezoning continues to change the face of our neighborhood. What steps would you take as council member to secure commitments from the new administration for the unrealized promises, to preserve and develop affordable housing, prevent displacement, and ensure that the neighborhood's infrastructure meets the needs of a growing community? We'll start with Councilmember Levin on that one.
Thank you, Lacey. This is arguably the most important issue facing this district today. I was not on the New York City Council in 2005 when the Greenpoint-Williamsburg rezoning was passed. And if I were there, I would not have approved it. I would not have stood by and allowed the amount of luxury housing that was approved to be built on our waterfront. Now, over the last 3.5 years, I have fought day in and day out to hold the Bloomberg administration accountable for the promised parks that they made a commitment to. And that includes Bushwick Inlet, that includes 65 Commercial Street, that includes Transmitter Park, which has been delivered at this point and fully built out. But there needs to be a whole lot more. We need to make sure that the developments along the waterfront have mechanisms in place so that the promised amount of open space and affordable housing is locked in. If you look, the very first rezoning that I did when I was in the New York City Council was a development called Rose Plaza on the river. The developer promised 20% affordable housing at the outset. I stood really alone in the New York City Council opposing the project. Eventually the developer promised 30% affordable housing, 30% affordable housing for family-sized units, and a maximum development height of 28 stories. That is significantly better than the overall Greenpoint-Williamsburg rezoning to the north, where it was 40 stories and 20%. We need to continue to do everything that we can. If that includes lawsuits, and that's what we have to do. But the fact of the matter is that this neighborhood has had, cannot really handle any more displacement because I tell you, I hear from senior citizens on almost a weekly basis calling me saying that they're being evicted, that they're losing their homes, that their rents have gone up to $3,000 or more. And so we need a better effort all around. We need better rent stabilization laws. We need to protect our seniors, most importantly.
Let's start here. We all know that the 2005 rezoning of Williamsburg and Greenpoint has completely failed our neighborhoods. We were promised over 1,000 units of affordable housing, and we received 13 so far. We haven't received the promised parkland either, and now we're being blackmailed. We're saying that after 8 years, we're finally going to be given these things that we were promised 8 years ago, but only if we accept 40-story towers along our waterfront. This is not right. I will not merely demand that these buildings build affordable housing units, I will actively fight their construction.
Yes.
There are things that can be done. But frankly, it's not too late, and to simply say, to accept our fate tepidly and say, build us some affordable units, build us a couple parks, and fine, give us 40-story towers. I will not accept that. There are things that can be done. Section 197A, the 197A plan of the charter, says that councilmen can initiate a rezoning process. I will do that in my very first week in city council. Secondly, we're basing this whole project, Greenpoint Landing and Commercial Street, around environmental impact studies that were conducted nearly a decade ago. These are completely insufficient. And furthermore, these studies never made it past phase 1 of testing. We can sue the city on this grounds. We can sue these projects, Article 78. We can prevent it. We can stop it. We can force better environmental impact studies. We need a transportation impact study. I will fight to prevent these projects from going up in their present form.
We have 30 seconds for rebuttal on that one if you want to do a quick follow-up.
Now, this has been a question that has definitely come up over the last couple of weeks in light of the certification of the amendment to the Greenpoint Landing rezoning and for 77 Commercial. The question that I've been asking is it possible to rezone the rezoning? Can you go back and initiate an Article 78? Well, unfortunately, an Article 78 has a 90-day time frame. So there doesn't seem to be a way through an Article 78 to undo the 2004 rezoning, 2005 rezoning. But I am committed to working with the community board. Right now, as they're looking for as they're looking to make recommendations on those two proposals, what can we do to really do what's best for this community? If we can downzone the 2005 rezoning, I would wholeheartedly embrace that. The question is how. An Article 78 is not a legally viable option, but if we can go back and do a new EIS, then let's explore that.
Go ahead.
Two quick responses to that. One, there is precedence. March 2008, 13 blocks were rezoned around Grand Street in central Williamsburg, preventing two 15-story monstrosities from going up. This rezoning took place after ground was broken on these construction sites. It's absolutely not too late.
Before we go to the next question, I just want to acknowledge the star of taxi videos everywhere in New York and our former council member, David Gasky. Recently, North Brooklyn has experienced an uptick in both violent crimes and quality of life violations, including vandalism and graffiti. What would you do as council member to help the NYPD preserve public safety in our community?
As all of you, I'm sure, know, it's been an absolutely horrible summer for crime in Greenpoint. Felony assaults are up over 250% year over year, and this is frankly horrific. Part of the problem is that Greenpoint has changed. It's a very different neighborhood than it was 10 years ago, a very different neighborhood than it was 5 years ago. And the 94th precinct is still funded at the same levels as it was 10 years ago. I will fight for more funding for the 94th. Let me give you one example. I was talking to someone last week whose bike was stolen. They called it the 94th precinct. They were told, we don't have anyone available for you. Call 911 instead. This is a precinct that is in shambles, that doesn't have the resources available to deal with our problems. Furthermore, I've been told over and over by so many community members that we need tighter bonds between the precinct and the community. I will fight to make sure these meetings happen. I know there's a meeting scheduled for Monday that was supposed to be between Councilman Levin and the precinct and the community. This was canceled. I don't know why. I know Councilman Levin did have a fundraiser planned that night in Brooklyn Heights, but I would fight for greater community input into the 94th precinct.
Well, this is a very important issue. As I said, I live in Greenpoint, and when I went home 2 nights ago at midnight, there were police in my local corner store because it had been held up. This is an issue that affects my neighbors and it affects me. Last week, when the individual was apprehended that had assaulted 3 women in the Greenpoint community, he was arrested a block away from my house. So I know what is going on in this community. I have my ears to the ground, and I have the local police commander on speed dial, as I have the XO as well on speed dial. And actually, Mr. Pierson, the reason why the meeting for Monday night was canceled was because the commanding officer of the precinct is out of town. And so we actually rescheduled for next Tuesday. So I invite all of you, including you, Mr. Pierson, to join us at this location next Tuesday night, where we'll have a meeting with the 94th precinct to discuss all of these pressing issues. But I think that a very important part of it, it's not just funding. You can't just fund a precinct. You have to fund the entire police department. Under Mayor Bloomberg, that funding has been decreased year after year after year. And so we need to fight for more cops citywide and to increase community participation. But when it comes to community participation, the fact of the matter is that the community council here in Greenpoint has done a fabulous job. And so the communication is there. We just need more resources.
The next question is going to be about education, and we're going to have 2 questions. The first one, each of the 1-minute answer. Our community school, District 14, the schools are predominantly Title I schools, meaning that federal funding is distributed to schools with high percentages of students from low-income families. As the neighborhood gentrifies, many of these schools will no longer qualify for this money. How will you help the district's already cash-strapped schools prepare for the loss of Title I funding and other budget cuts?
Thank you for that very important question. Now, first, I want to say that this community school district, District 14, is one of the best that we have in Brooklyn, and it has an amazing group of schools, an amazing group of principals, an amazing group of parents. WAGPOPS has been amazing in their organizational skills over the last few years in organizing around educational issues. Now, this is, as you said, Jeff, a major issue facing our local schools because as the community continues to be gentrified, where school after school is at risk of losing their Title I status. We need to get more funding into the local schools, your local elementary, middle schools, and high schools. I have fought for that year after year. I'm on the education committee, and I've been one of the leaders in making sure that equitable funding goes to our local schools. This year alone, the charter budget increased by $210 million. I exposed that fact, I called attention to it, and I'm going to fight against it year after year until our local schools get their fair share, and we stop giving extra funding to the special interests in the city.
As always, we absolutely need to fight for more funding for our schools. Year after year, it's the same battle. It's ridiculous. 2 programs in particular I would fight for. Mayor Bloomberg has systematically cut funding for after-school programs every year of his 12 years in office. I would fight to restore that. I've seen firsthand over the last 8 years of running my nonprofit that no matter what we do between the hours of 8:30 a.m. and 3 p.m., if our kids are on the street for the next 5 hours, if they're engaged in 5 straight hours of mind-numbing video games, everything that we do during the school day is lost. I will fight to restore that funding. Secondly, I fully support Public Advocate Bill de Blasio's plan to make pre-kindergarten a universal right. It's absolutely the fair thing to do, the equitable thing to do, and I will fight for it. Third, I think we need to take control away from the mayor on education. Even if you think that Mayor Bloomberg has handled this control well and wisely, the idea of Joe Lota having control over our schools scares the heck out of me. I will fight to return control of our schools to us through a democratically elected school board.
second education question, and we'll continue with Stephen Pierson, is we've seen, and you guys both touched on it, just a huge jump in the number of charter schools coming into the community. And especially elementary schools where there's a need for middle schools and high schools. And schools that, charter schools that don't necessarily reflect the diversity of the community. So the question is, what can you do to make sure that, number one, our public schools are operating on an even rating field with the charter schools, and number two, to really promote the community public schools?
First and foremost, I agree with Steve that Greenpoint is blessed to have some of the best public schools in all of New York. Some of the best teachers and the best students too. The charter school issue is a nuanced one. Our public education system is clearly broken. I've seen it firsthand year after year. At their best, charter schools allow us to innovate and experiment with solutions, and if they work, apply them citywide. At their worst, co-located schools that don't pay rent, they drain resources from our public schools, they create a tiered social structure for our children, and everybody loses. It's a nuanced issue. In Greenpoint, I see absolutely no need for charter schools. Downtown Brooklyn, on the other hand, faces an imminent school overcrowding crisis, and it's possible that charter schools could be used to help solve that overcrowding. It's a nuanced issue, and I think grandiose statements on either side of it don't serve much useful purpose.
Thank you for the question, Jeff. I got to tell you, I actually called this year for a total moratorium on charter schools, based on the fact that, as I said before, the budget for charter schools is out of control. It is jumping at a rate of either $100 or $200 million a year. Right now, it's over $1 billion, and it's an uncontrolled increase actually, because the Bloomberg administration has been citing charter schools year after year. And the hidden cost to that is that when they cite it, the first year it's a single grade, the second year it's 2 grades, the third year it's 3 grades, so on and so forth. And so the costs continue to increase and escalate year after year. There needs to be a moratorium. We don't know, the Department of Education, when I asked them in a hearing, do you know what the cost increase is going to be next year? They had no idea. They had no idea. So in order for us to get our hands around this, and to control costs, because every dollar that's increased in that budget line is coming from another budget line in the Department of Education, and it's always coming from your local public schools. So right now, I think it's time for some leadership on this issue to say, we have enough in the city for now, we'll put a moratorium, we'll see how the costs we're able to rein them in, and we can move on from there. But for the time being, there ought to be a moratorium.
Okay, this question is only for Stephen Pierson. You've got 90 seconds to answer, and Steve, you have 30 seconds Steve Levin, 30 seconds for rebuttal.
How about going forward, I could be Stephen, he could be Steve?
We can do that?
Yeah.
The question for you, Stephen, is this forum represents the first time many Williamsburg and Greenpoint residents are meeting you. Could you please discuss what work you've done in the Williamsburg and Greenpoint area prior to running for the City Council, and what of your experience should give this community, the community's residents, confidence that you'll be an effective advocate for us?
As I mentioned in my intro, and thanks for the question by the way, Jeff, I've been living in this community for a long time. 15 years, that might not be long for some of you, but I think it's enough time to get to know a district. I've spent 5 years in Dumbo, I'm living in Brooklyn Heights now. Running a nonprofit for the last 8 years has shown me a lot. It's shown me that our public education system is broken, and it's shown me how our government responds to these problems. I've also been a member of the community board, CB2, for 3 years, a little less than 2 years, and I've been a member of the Democratic County Committee. Having lived in this district for as long as I have, having started a nonprofit here, having raised a family here, I'm so committed to this community, I care about it enough that I would never, ever sell it out for political gain. You know, when 40-story buildings are threatened to loom over us, I'm not going to just tepidly sit here and demand that we get a few affordable units out of it. I'm going to fight for our rights. This is not just my home, but this is my daughter's home, and I will never put political self-interest ahead of politics.
thank you, Jeff. As I said in my introduction, I live in this community. I live on Morgan Avenue between Nassau and Drake. And the issues that are affecting this community, the issues that I see when I get up in the morning, the issues that I see when I go home at night. I'll give you just a small example. Underneath the BQE at the end of Sutton Street, there often are a group of men who are classified as chronic public inebriates. They sleep underneath the BQE, they sleep in McCarran Park, they sleep in McGurlock Park, and year after year, one of those gentlemen dies in the park in the winter of hypothermia. I led the charge for 3 years. Okay.
Time, sorry.
I want to, really quickly, I've led the charge for 3 years to get 10 shelter beds for these men. So that this past year, when we were able to achieve that, and they were funded by the Department of Homeless Services, not a single guy died this year.
Okay, we're going to have to cut it there.
And that's an issue that is important to this neighborhood, and that's a neighborhood issue that takes neighborhood know-how.
So, Councilmember Levin, you also get a question just for you. So your relationship with longtime mentor Vito Lopez has been a recurring theme of this campaign. Over 4 years in the City Council, you have directed millions of dollars to Vito's nonprofit agency, Ridgewood Bushwick Senior Citizens Council, despite the fact that it does not serve constituents of our district. Will you continue to fund RBSCC if you are re-elected? Also, you've said you no longer speak with Vito Lopez. What have you done to demonstrate that you've broken your ties with him? Again, that's 90 seconds with a 30-second rebuttal.
Thank you, Lacey. So my opponent has been putting out there in mailers, on the internet, and blogs, on Twitter, saying that I've given millions of dollars to Ridgewood Bushwick. That's an out-and-out falsehood, and either it demonstrates to me that he's misleading the public, or he doesn't understand that the way that the City Council budget works. And to be honest with you, I don't know which of those is worse. The fact of the matter is that I've funded a handful of programs, small programs in the council budget that have gone to Ridgewood Bushwick. One is a lead safe house program which services families from throughout Brooklyn and provides them with emergency shelter when their children are lead poisoned and the city tells them that they need to be out of their home. That doesn't serve one district, it serves the entire borough. It is a program that I used to run, so I know that it works and I know that it's necessary. And I provided a small amount of funding every year for that. In addition, I fund a very small allocation of $9,000 so that the seniors in the 33rd district, in fact, the seniors that will be in this senior center tomorrow morning, in this exact space, so that they can get out of town for a senior picnic a year to go out to Long Island. And the fact of the matter is, they love that picnic, and those seniors have demanded that I continue to fund that. So if Mr. Pierson doesn't want that transportation to be funded, I encourage him to come back to this place tomorrow morning and tell the senior citizens at Crocker Senior Center that he would defund that. The fact of the matter is, I've called on Vito Lopez to resign from the State Assembly. I called on him not to run for the City Council. I haven't spoken to him in many, many months. I don't intend to speak to him, and I'm telling you that I give you my word that when I get up every morning and I go to City Hall, I'm there to advocate for the constituents that I represent. Those people that live in Greenpoint, in Williamsburg, in Brooklyn Heights, in Borum Hill, in Dumbo. And that is my charge, and that's what I am there to do. And I give you my word that that's what I do. And the people that I'm accountable to are the people in this district.
All right.
Let me be clear about a couple things, first of all. The $6.679 million, we hired an independent investigator to look into every single line of the budget. We have the results meticulously documented on our website. I urge you to go there, pearsonforcouncil.com. I fully stand by that number. It's fully accurate. Councilman Levin is not counting his capital allocations, Bill's allocations that he sponsored and co-sponsored. Secondly, let's be clear. This is a completely fraudulent operation designed to profit Vito and his cronies. The entire executive board is filled with his friends, his girlfriends. They make preposterous salaries. There's a darn good reason why it's been the target of over a dozen federal, city, and state investigations for fraud. And it doesn't serve residents of this district. Even if we were to take it on faith that there's no fraud there, which the courts have deemed otherwise, it doesn't serve residents of this district. You were elected to serve this district. I can name 2 organizations,
Okay.
you're talking about web
Time.
page, that serve this district and this district alone.
Please wrap it up. I'm sure you guys will address that when you're asking each other questions, so maybe we can come back to that.
There are a lot of points that I'd like to talk
Okay.
about.
Mr. Pierson, you cited an independent investigator that came up with those numbers which you cited, which I think is accounting for all of the Brooklyn delegation allocations and all of the council speakers allocations. I want to ask you, who is that person? Because you said it's an independent investigator, but you neglected to cite who actually that independent investigator was.
Look, go to the website, there's a link from every single line item. There's a link to the specific line item in the budget. Go for yourself, do your own research, it adds up. And the link to Vito isn't just about this money. This money matters. Taxpayers deserve to know where their money is going and that it's going out of our district. Look at the sugar refinery, where you and Vito were lockstep opposed to the development, and then suddenly the developer of the sugar refinery gives Ridgewood Bushwick a $2 million tax-free loan, and then instantly the next week, the 2 of you suddenly support the redevelopment. Let's look at Brooklyn Bridge Park, where you had 1 board appointee, and you used it
that's
to
fine.
appoint Vito's chief of staff, who doesn't even
We
live
can
in
come back to
Brooklyn.
this later if you want to. I'm going to ask a question that I think you both know is pretty important to me. It's about participatory budgeting. So, Councilmember Levin, last year you allocated $1 million of your discretionary funding for participatory budgeting. You've stated that you would like to repeat the process again this year. Were you happy with the outcome of the first round, and what would you plan to do differently the next time? And to Mr. Pierson, would you allocate money for participatory budgeting? And if so, what might you do differently from Mr. Levin? That's 45 seconds.
Thank you, Lacey. I think that participatory budgeting last year was a tremendous success. In fact, I ended up allocating more than $1 million of capital funding because there were 5 of the 5 winners. We allocated an additional funding for the 6th place finisher. It was a tremendous success. Over 2,600 people participated throughout the 33rd district. I think this year we're going to do better in terms of outreach and getting more people to participate. I want to make sure that in particular schools and school communities that are not as privileged as some others have a greater participation rate, and making sure that schools like PS 380, PS 16, PS 133, PS 38 get more involved in the participatory budgeting process. But I think that we're going to be able to achieve that. We've actually already started this year here in August for the vote that's going to be happening in April.
Participatory budgeting is a great idea. It takes our government in a great direction, and I would absolutely do it all 4 years as a councilman. I'm glad that Councilman Levin changed his mind and supported it the second year that he could after declining to do so the first year. And I won't merely use it, I will be a leader on it. While all the projects that came out of this were worthwhile, our poorest voices, people living in Bedford Gardens, Independence Towers, Gowanus Wyckoff houses, are not going to be heard as participatory budgeting currently stands. We need to actively involve them. All the winning projects win because they coalesce around social media and email, things that people in Independence Towers don't quite have the access to. So there's a great group called Community Voices Heard that empowers these populations, and I would absolutely bring them into the participatory budgeting process.
The last question from us, between the rezoning and rising commercial rents, North Brooklyn has lost many of its mom and pop businesses. What can you do to, number one, support the local small business economy, and number two, what can you do in the city council to help small businesses deal with exorbitant fines and overly burdensome regulations? For example, the letterways that restaurants are dealing with right now. 2 minutes each.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Greenpoint is blessed to have a strong economy fabric of local businesses, entrepreneurs, local folks that have put in their life savings to making their dreams come true, their shops, their restaurants, and we need to do a lot more to continue to support them. I was actually looking back, in years past, there's always been the idea of instituting some type of commercial rent control or commercial rent stabilization that would guard against exorbitant rent increases for leases year after year. It exists in residential housing. I believe that it should come back and should be part of our framework as we work with commercial business.
That was a bill that had majority
That's
council
one thing.
support, but was killed by Kristen Clinton.
We need to do more to decrease
Three supports
the
for
fines.
mayor.
The Bloomberg administration has looked at small businesses as a cash cow. I've actually, I did some of the only legislation that this city has ever done. I got it passed this year, which decreased the fines on street vendors. Street vendors were getting $1,000 fines for small violations, non-health related violations. And we were able to work with the rest of the council, with the speaker's office, to get those fines capped at $500. I'd like to see more fine caps happening throughout the city on brick and mortar businesses as well. And I will lead the charge for next term to do that. Because we need to do more. We absolutely need to do more. And we need to actually change the entire paradigm of how this city and the agencies deal with small businesses. I do want to commend the Greenpoint Chamber of Commerce because in recent months, the Greenpoint Chamber has taken it upon themselves to organize businesses to be an advocacy organization, to advocate for new legislation, to advocate against excessive fines. I look forward to working with them and continuing to work with them to make sure that those bills become a reality. But it's tough to do. It's not easy to get this stuff implemented, so it takes a lot of hard work, and I'm looking forward to putting that hard work. Thank you.
Jeff's question gets at the very heart of why we love Brooklyn. We love Brooklyn because it has these mom and pop stores, because we don't have Starbucks every 3 blocks and Urban Outfitters every 5 blocks. And I will fight to make it stay this way. This is why I've lived here for 15 years. 3 things we can do to help. 1, commercial rent stabilization needs to happen. That will be one of my top priorities. 2, as Jeff mentioned, we have just a Byzantine number of forms you need to fill out to even start a business. It's virtually impossible to start a business. You need to go through 8 different agencies, 15, 18 different forms. I would be in favor of creating a one-stop shop where you could go get all these done. 3rd, even though we're sort of finally peering out from the depths of this recession, credit lines have not returned to normal. Credit is mostly inaccessible for small business owners. The Small Business Coalition has a great idea, a great proposal. It's a public-private partnership. It would give small businesses lines of credit ranging up to $25, low and no interest lines of credit. I would fight very hard to make this happen and give businesses the credit they need.
Okay, so now time for you to each ask each other questions. You'll have 2 minutes to respond, plus 30 seconds of rebuttal each. We'll start with Mr. Pierson.
So as many of you know, we have an incredibly diverse district, and this district includes 55,000 members of the Hasidic community. Those Hasids are divided between 2 major sects, the Aaronites and the Zelenim. These sects don't get along. They often support different political candidates. The Zelenim have long been courted by Vito, and they went with Steve in the last election, to the degree that if they hadn't supported Steve, he actually would have finished 4th. It's fine to get your votes where you can. I have no problem with that. The problem is that this is a needy community. The average family income is just $19,000 a year. Since Steve got into office, he has completely and utterly ignored the entire 20,000 Aaronite community. He has refused to meet with them once. He's ignored their needs. They've reached out to him and reached out to him and reached out to him. They have poor children. They have many needs. Finally, about 2 months ago, you were confronted about this at an NKD meeting, actually, and you said, of course I'll reach out to you. Of course I'll meet with you. So they reached out to you yet again. They called your office the next day, and the next day, and the next day after that, and still you continue to ignore 20,000 working class residents of this district. I'm wondering how you can justify that and who you are serving by doing so.
Well, the fact of the matter is that, one thing, there are not just 2 sects of Hasidic Jews in Williamsburg. There are actually many sects. And I've met with all of them numerous times. So when there have been issues that have come up around childcare, after-school vouchers, I've met with all the leaders of all of the yeshivas, including the Aronis, including the Zalis, including the Pupas, and the Fosenberg, and the Veen, and the Vizhnit, and I meet with all of them on the issues that really matter. When it comes to standing up for childcare, to standing up for equal access to education dollars, I've met with the leaders of those institutions. I don't ask which sector they belong to. I meet with them. My office, furthermore, has a policy, an open-door policy to any constituent that comes to us. We receive calls from dozens of Hasidic constituents a month, easily, probably many dozens a month. We never ask what sect they belong to. We serve them, we serve their needs. If it's a question with NYCHA, if it's a question with the school system, if it's a question about their child care vouchers, we serve those people. In addition, when the Aronim faction had an issue with the Department of Buildings around their mikvah, which is their ritual bath, I went to the Buildings Department. I worked with that community. I worked with the Deputy Commissioner of the Buildings Department to ensure that they got their building permit. So if some of the political folks in that community want to make a big issue about having a political meeting, that's one thing. But when it comes to serving the constituents, I've been there time and again. My staff is there. Again, my office has an open door policy. We don't ask what sector you belong to. We ask, are you in need, and how can we help?
We have a 30-second rebuttal now.
Steve, sometimes we have minor disagreements, and that's fine, and I'm happy to be polite about those, but frankly, what you just heard is a bald-faced lie. Talk to any member of the Aronite community, and they will tell you he has completely and utterly ignored them. There was a measles outbreak in the school system in the entire Hasidic community over the summer. It was bad. Steve correctly organized a community outreach. He organized a measles information program, a meeting. He actively did not invite anyone from the 20,000 members of the Aronite community. I talked to one of their school leaders, Isaac Sofer, who runs a school program with 6,000 students. And he tells me that Steve not only refuses to meet with them, but he refuses to even shake his hand, and he crosses the street when he sees them coming. This is not appropriate behavior of a professor.
That's simply not true. In fact, I went back. I anticipated that Mr. Pierson was going to say this, and so I looked at the email inviting yeshiva leaders to that measles meeting that we had a couple of months ago, and the head of Central UTA was on that email list, on that invitation. I'm not sure why he didn't come to the meeting, but he certainly was invited, sir.
I'm happy to make people available to the press. That will dispute that.
We are all here today to take part in the fundamental basic building block of democracy, which is coming out to vote, voting local, supporting a candidate or candidates for local office who represents our communities in our city government. You said that you've lived here for 14 years. In that time, according to public record, you have never voted in a local election. Now here you are, here we both are, asking these wonderful people to cast their votes for us to represent them on the New York City Council in a local election. Can you explain why you've never voted in a local election in New York City?
First of all, I do regret that. You know, I've lived here for 15 years. Voting or not voting doesn't always fully ascribe your commitment to your community. 2.5 years ago, my first daughter was born. And those of you who have children know well that this fundamentally alters your outlook on the community. No matter how much you care about your home and your neighborhood and your surrounding communities, having a daughter, raising a family, changes everything. It's why immediately after she was born, I immediately joined my community board. I became a member of the Democratic County Committee, and I'm doing everything possible to make our community not only better for me, but better for my daughter.
Thank you. So we have about half an hour left, so we're going to take some questions from the audience. We have a few here. If anybody else wants to contribute questions, Lincoln has some index cards, and so get them from him and pass them back to him. He'll bring them up to us. These are each going to be a minute, so pretty short. We're going to start with a softball for fun. What's your favorite book?
I'll go with recent. The book that I've most enjoyed recently is Into Thin Air by John Krakauer. It's a harrowing story of perseverance and courage. I recommend it to anybody in the audience. It's about an expedition to Mount Everest, but it's a phenomenal book and shows the power of
I have to go with two books. My life is very bifurcated at the moment. The Battle for Gotham. It's an incredible story of New York's history. Jane Jacobs versus Robert Moses. Spoiler, does not have a happy ending. Robert Moses wins. My other favorite book, I have to say, the old classic, Goodnight Moon. I read it every night to my daughter before she goes to bed. She knows most of the lines, and the ones that she doesn't know, she mumbles, and it's the most adorable thing ever, and she is the happiest little 2-year-old afterwards.
How will you assure current or enhanced services in our community as the municipal budget endures more cutbacks? Taxes, higher property valuation, or will basic services just shrink?
I have two answers to that. The first answer is a broader budget answer. Our comptroller, John Liu, conducted a study a year or so ago, and it basically demonstrated that our overall tax structure in New York is actually one of the least progressive in the whole country. He estimated that if we made it more progressive, if we closed loopholes on Wall Street companies, we could not only cut the taxes of 93% of us citizens, but simultaneously raise $1.24 billion more every year. I would strongly advocate for those progressive tax reforms. Secondly, I would spend our discretionary funding considerably different than Councilman Levin. I would keep every last dollar in this district.
Well, thank you very much, whoever asked that question. That was a good question. I've actually am just introducing legislation right now calling on the state of New York to institute a Robin Hood tax, collecting tax revenue from Wall Street transactions. That's one thing that we can do to increase our city's budget. The city's budget is our defining document, and I've had 4 budgets now that I've been a part of, and each time I've fought for better services for our schools, more after-school programs, more child care programs, more transportation programs, more programs for the elderly. What it comes down to is priorities. We need to do a better job. We on the city council need to do a better job of holding the administration's feet to the fire, using our budget authority that we have as per the charter to say that we're not going to spend all this money on consultants, we're not going to spend all this money on outside contractors. The contract budget is in the billions of dollars. So there's money in the budget to reprioritize towards our communities. But when it comes down to it, we need to look at Wall Street transactions to get more revenue out of that. And to be honest with you, folks that are making more than $1 million a year need to pay a little bit more in income taxes for the city of New York.
Okay, next question is actually more of a statement, I think, for you to respond to. We need express bus service from Greenpoint, Williamsburg directly to Midtown over the 59th Street Bridge. Middle Village has an express bus to Manhattan, especially after Superstorm Sandy. We need better transportation, and even more so with massive development coming to Greenpoint. How do you respond to that?
As you all know, and judging by the applause you do know, Greenpoint has long been on the short end of the transportation stick. G-Train service has been pathetic. We all know about the G-Train Sprint. First and foremost, we need to fully implement the recommendations, all of them, from the MTA's full-on review of the G-Train. My understanding is that we're about $700,000 short of being able to do that. I would make it my highest priority to fight for that money. Secondly, ferry service. Every 20 minutes during rush hour is absolutely unacceptable. Third, with these major developments planned, I don't see how we can possibly maintain a viable transportation network with up to 20,000 new residents coming in. I would absolutely demand to see a full comprehensive transportation impact study before anything else goes forward with this project. Third, we need safer streets. I would advocate strongly for more slow zones, more bike lanes, and bike share to immediately come to Greenpoint.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. We do need an express bus service over the 59th Street Bridge. I've worked with Assemblyman Joe Lento and Congresswoman Maloney on getting a new bus line that's going to be going up the western side of Greenpoint, and our goal long term is to get that to go into Midtown over the 59th Street Bridge. I've worked over the last 3.5 years with my staff on getting the East River Ferry service up and running. Now, so that's something that I worked long and hard with EDC on making sure that we're getting the fares as low as possible, and that we're getting as much city subsidy to that program so that we can continue to decrease the fares and get more service. And as a result, it has been a tremendous success. Can it be better? Absolutely. And I look forward to making sure that that is implemented. When it comes to major developers providing transportation, when Domino was rezoned in 2010, I fought and succeeded in getting a bus service that goes directly to the M train at Marcy, and that was committed to by the previous developer. So there's a lot to do, but we have accomplished a lot over the past few years.
How will you deal with Vito Lopez if he's elected to the city council on the 34th?
First off, I want to make it clear that I've called on Vito Lopez to not run for the city council. So I don't think it would serve the body well to have him there, and I don't think he should be running at all. I want to make that very, very clear. I don't intend to have a working relationship with Vito Lopez. I haven't spoken to the man in many months, and so I don't intend on having a working relationship. You know, I wish Mr. Reynoso very well, because I think that he's a very smart guy. He's a very good candidate, and so you know, I don't think that Vito Lopez should be running for the seat at all.
Let me start by saying that when these charges against Vito Lopez came to light, when it became clear that he was a serial sexual harasser and assaulter of dozens of his staff over many years, Steve Levin was completely silent. Steve Levin did distance himself in a press release. Eventually, 8 months too late, he was the very last political figure in all of Brooklyn to disassociate himself from Vito. He did it during an election year. Form your own judgments, please. Steve was Vito's chief of staff. When he was elected to office, he was very clear about this fact that Vito was fully responsible for getting him elected. He called Vito his friend and mentor. He said everything he learned from Vito. These are direct quotes. It's not surprising that he sent so much money to Vito's nonprofit. It's not surprising that he appointed Vito's chief of staff to the board of Brooklyn Bridge Park. It's not surprising that he flipped on Domino with Vito. Even if it's true that now you're distancing yourself, it's way too little, way too late.
Okay. Our district has been left out of city curbside compost pickup. The person who wrote the question would like to see us become leaders for green living, encouraging clotheslines, reuse, recycle, gray water use, etc. How would you help us do that?
Thank you, that's an excellent question. I will say that I've already advocated to the Department of Sanitation that Greenpoint be added to the pilot program. The pilot program right now for curbside compost pickup is actually very small. In Brooklyn, it's in Windsor Terrace. It's a small part pilot program. Already, over the last few weeks, I've met with them. I've advocated that this be expanded to every neighborhood in the 33rd District that wants it. And I think that I've heard a lot of enthusiasm for composting throughout this district, in particular in this neighborhood. And I actually have been helping with the compost bin in the backyard of the Milton Street Greenpoint Reformed Church over the last 8 or 9 months, and even though I've kind of neglected it over the last 2 months or so, it's been a great joy. So I encourage everybody to do your part in composting, and I'm working to get it expanded here in Greenpoint.
let me just focus on one issue because we have limited time here. Our sewer systems are not sufficient currently. And one of the main problems is that when new developments come up, when they're being built, we're not also asking them to build out our infrastructure at the same time. If you look at the condos that line Baird Street south of McCarran Park, these are not huge. They're only 10 to 15 stories. And yet I've talked to residents of Baird Street and the surrounding areas, and they've said, people who've lived there for 20, 25 years, that whenever there's a major rainstorm now, after these condos were built, their basements now flood, costing them thousands of dollars in damage. We need to make our developers build out infrastructure. We need to make them incorporate innovations like blue roofs and green roofs, things that trap our water and prevent sewage overflow. We also need to incorporate bioswales into our street designs. We need to do everything possible to keep our sewers from overflowing.
We discussed small business, but what about industry and manufacturing? Do hotels and clubs belong in the IBD?
No, they don't. Absolutely 100%, they do not belong in the IBZ. The IBZ program, for those of you that don't know, is the Industrial Business Zones. Were set up by the Bloomberg administration to protect small businesses. We have several IBZs here in North Brooklyn. Unfortunately, the Bloomberg administration has proposed year after year to defund them to the point where they're having a hard time functioning. I've fought to restore the funding, and I've succeeded in restoring the funding. But we need to do more in the next administration so that we're supporting local small manufacturers and industrial businesses. I am working right now with Councilmember Brad Lander and the other part of the district around the Gowanus area, coming up with a zoning framework that can allow for real mixed use. And that's what we're talking about. That's what we need in this neighborhood, is real mixed use. So we have small manufacturers, room for residential, but that we're not crowding out the manufacturers. We're making the price point so high that manufacturers can't exist here. The future of New York City is in light industrial, commercial, and green tech jobs. And we need to make sure that we're creating the framework and the infrastructure to allow that to happen here in North Brooklyn.
We actually fully agree on something, which is great. They have no place in the IBZs, and absolutely, we need to support our small businesses. The Bloomberg administration has continually prioritized major developments over our small businesses. And I go back to commercial rent stabilization. We need to implement this now, and we need to give businesses low interest and no interest lines of credit. The Small Business Coalition has a number of solutions to this, and I will work with them very closely to implement all of those solutions.
General question is, what will you do as councilman to prevent further economic segregation on the waterfront? More specifically, 421A money is being poured into subsidizing the rich for waterfront property. What will you do as a councilman to stop this and prevent separation of lower and upper class in terms of income?
So I've been very encouraged over the last couple of weeks, actually, if you've been following the news, where this is an issue that is now taking on citywide significance. I think that Chris Quinn today was very critical of a project on the Upper West Side where it's being proposed. Part of the problem is we need to rethink how the inclusionary zoning program works and other programs that provide subsidies for housing so that they do not allow for really what is segregated housing. If you look at what's going on at the Edge and at Northside Piers, that is not the kind of neighborhood that we want, where affordable units or low-income units are in lower buildings, which don't have access to the amenities that the upper-income units have. We cannot allow that to go forward, and I'm actually very encouraged that now this is taking on a citywide profile, and I'm looking forward to working with the new administration. I'll make sure that can't happen again. But specifically, we need to, any rezoning that comes forward that passes, then I want to make sure that any rezoning has a fully integrated affordable housing component and does not have segregated housing. That's not who we are as a neighborhood, that's not who we are as a city.
Absolutely agree, and I'm going to make a promise to you right now that when we negotiate with new developments, new developers, when we sign memorandums of understanding, MOUs, I will never sign off on a new building that has separate entrances.
Our next audience question. Last year, Two Trees Management bought Domino Sugar for $185 million. Now, Two Trees is asking for the rights to build 60-story towers and even more density in exchange for improving the plan by building 500,000 square feet of office space and more square feet of open space. What is your position?
Once again, this is, as I mentioned earlier, this is blackmail. We were promised affordable housing, we were promised parks as part of the 2005 upzoning. We did not receive them. Now we're being told we can only get them if we agree to a 60-story monstrosity on our waterfronts. I will not tolerate this. As I mentioned before, there are still avenues of appeal. Section 197A rezoning plans, suing over environmental impact statements under Article 78. I will absolutely take advantage of these 60 floors. We cannot accommodate that. Our transportation systems can't accommodate that. Our sewage systems can't accommodate this, and I will fight it every step of the way.
Well, first I want to clear something up. Earlier, Mr. Pierson made an accusation that I flipped on the Domino project as a result of Ridgewood Bush receiving a loan. That's an outright falsehood, and I just want to make it clear that that did not happen. And if Mr. Pierson were around during the Domino rezoning in 2010, he would know that I was actually out there often alone fighting against that rezoning. In fact, there were 5 or 6 editorials in the Daily News attacking me personally for saying that it was going to overload the transportation infrastructure in the neighborhood. Mayor Bloomberg mocked me, and I was a large part with this community fighting against that just us. And we did not prevail. We did not prevail to stop that rezoning. But we need to make sure that at this point, been made it very clear to Two Trees, who owns the property now, that our community is not for sale, and that I'm going to be extremely difficult with them. I have made it clear that I'm not for sale, and we're going to do everything we can to ensure that this community is served well. And if they don't provide the adequate number of affordable housing in a reasonably sized development, then I'm not going to support that rezoning.
I would just encourage you to look up a 2010 article from the New York Post with the title "Vito Flips for Domino." That tells a very different story.
We're in the Polish Slavic Center right now, so I think this is an appropriate question. How are you going to engage the Polish community on issues of affordable housing, homelessness, and small business services?
Homelessness, as we all know, is a big issue here in Greenpoint. We haven't invested enough in mental health services. Study after study shows that for every $1 we put into mental health services, we save $4 through reduced healthcare costs and prison costs. Investing more into mental health services is not only the moral thing to do, the ethical thing to do, but it's the financially sound thing to do. I will absolutely advocate for more mental health services in Greenpoint.
Since my very first days as city council member here in Greenpoint, I convened with Rami Metal, my Greenpoint liaison. He's now moved on as my legislative director, the Greenpoint Homelessness Task Force. We've worked with Common Ground. We've worked with the Department of Mental Health and Mental Health, Department of Homeless Services, community leaders like Neil Sheehan, Pat McDonald, Erica Volker, and others who are dedicated to finding a solution to this problem. We worked together. It took a long time and a lot of work, and we were able to get 10 beds for the homeless population here in Greenpoint. And as I said before, this was the first year where these guys had a place to go every night during the coldest months in the winter. And as a result, this is the first year that nobody died of hypothermia. That actually, if you were to ask me what the single accomplishment that I've had in my first term, I would point to that and say that that's what I'm proud of. I'm proud of getting resources to the folks that desperately need it, and those that are often forgotten. Thank you.
Because the time is running down, we want to give the candidates a chance to give a quick closing statement. So first of all, I want to thank Stephen and Steve for, again, taking the time out tonight to come see us and speak with us. We're going to turn the microphone over to Steve then for a 2-minute closing statement, and then Steve can have a 2-minute closing statement. And there's no rebuttal to this.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Lacey, for moderating tonight. And thank you to all of you for coming out. This is an incredible showing of community willpower. Steve and I certainly have some things in common. We're both Democrats. We share the same first name. We share the same alma mater. And we share the same tasty complexion. What we do, right? As you've noted, we have some differences too. I moved to this community 15 years ago to join a community and to raise a family eventually. Having lived here for 15 years, having run a nonprofit here for 8 years, having raised a daughter, I am committed to this community. I care enough about this community that I would never, ever sell it out for the sake of backroom political deals or any kind of political gain. When plans are put forward to build 40-story towers on our waterfront, I am deeply concerned about my daughter's future in this community. I won't merely sit here and say let's get some affordable units out of it. I'm going to fight for our community's future. I'm going to do everything I can to prevent the scale and scope of this project. I will fight it. I will sue it. I won't rest until that happens. To be frank, I come from the nonprofit world. I don't really give a damn about political calculations and ambitions and backroom deals. I will simply always fight for this community and its interests. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you. I want to thank New Kings Democrats and Greenpoint Gazette for hosting tonight. I want to thank Mr. Pierson. I want to thank all of you for being here and for your engagement. I've been, as I said before, extremely proud. This has been the most fulfilling experience of my life to be able to have represented this district, this wonderful district, for the last 3.5 years. And when I get up every morning and I go to City Hall, I am fully charged with representing this community to the best of my ability, fighting for your concerns, fighting for what matters to you most, fighting for better schools, for better after-school programs, for early childhood education programs, for safer streets, for increased transportation opportunities, for more parks, for more open space. And that's what I go to work doing. And to me, that has been a remarkably fulfilling thing, because I've been able to see the strength of a community time and again, pride in the community, where the community has stood up to powerful interests. I've often felt like I'm fortunate to be able to stand with you in demanding your rights. And so I give you my word and my commitment that if you re-elect me, I am going to continue to do that day in and day out. And when there's a concern that this community has, when we're not getting the services that we need, when the city's trying to close a senior center, when the city's trying to defund an after-school program, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to use every tool in my arsenal, every tool in the toolbox to get the resources that we need in this community, to make sure that our city is there for the future for our kids to thrive. It is vitally important that there's an advocate in the city council that can stand up to the community, that can stand up to the neighborhoods, that can stand up to the powerful interests that are often running this city. And I've been proud to have served that role in the last 3.5 years, and I ask for your support and your vote so I can continue to do that, because it is absolutely essential that we have a voice, that we have a strong voice, and that we move
forward to making sure that New York is an even better place in the future. Thank you very much.